class, I'm going to show you about working with video files between Nuke and Premiere, among other things, some organizational structure and whatnot. Here I have a lovely MP4 of a background plate. You can see it's video, it has noise, it's moving a little bit. But if I, in Nuke, do a read and try to bring in that same MP4, there's an error. It may give you a reason or it may not. It might just say error, but sometimes Nuke does not like certain kinds of video files. Usually we in visual effects work with image sequences, and I'll show you what I mean if you don't know what that means already. So I need to turn this into an image sequence. One way I can do that is in Premiere. So I'll hit File, Import, and I'm going to grab this clip. Boom, there it is. Give it a second. Cool. There it is. Plays fine in Premiere, right? I'm going to drag that to the timeline. And actually, I want to work in 24 frames a second, but I'll get there. So once it's here on my timeline, I'm going to hit File, Export Media, and I want to export this in individual frames. So if you zoom in here on the timeline, and it's like it's actually like 29.97 frames per second. This is frame 1, frame 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, each individual frame. There's not actually really a such thing as continuous video. You have a bunch of individual frames happening at a certain frame rate. You should all be very well familiar with that concept by now. So once again, I'm going to make sure my sequence is selected to turn this into an image sequence, export media. I'll use PNG for this. PNG is an uncompressed format. You can find that in the reading or in the text that I recommended. You'll say maximum depth, maximum quality, and you want to make sure that export as sequence is checked. And you know what? For simplicity's sake and for Nuke, I'm going to say 24 frames per second. No need for audio here, but there's one sort of catch here. I want my it's called frame padding. I want this, when it numbers my frames, to produce to put 4 numbers at the end of my file. Just want to make sure I'm browsing to the right place here. I made a Premiere folder here for this project. Actually, I'm going to go source. I'm going to make a folder here that says city_png sequence, so that it doesn't put a whole bunch of a zillion images in here with other files. That sequence should have its own folder, so it's going to go in there. So anyways, I was talking about having frame padding, the number of digits happening after my file name. So when I do this in Premiere, I'm going to put a dot and then a 0. At the end, Premiere is automatically going to add, as you can see here, .png. And it's going to number them in order, each frame in order, but it's going to add a 0 here. You always want to have an extra 0 in there, just in case, or maybe even 2. So I'll just keep 2 on there so you can see what I mean. Hit save. If you have hundreds of frames, you're going to need 2 extra zeros here. If you're going to have thousands of frames, you're going to need 3 extra zeros or 4. So here we go. I'm going to go make sure everything is okay. Export. And if I open this, you're going to see each image popping up while that's rendering. And you'll see the extra zeros here in front of this number that Premiere is creating. I should have put 1 0 in there. It's CG and visual effects softwares like it to have an even number of padding. I'm just going to cancel this. I have enough frames. I'm just going to close this. I'm going to go back to shouldn't have done that. I'm going to go back to my Nuke, because it doesn't matter which one. I'm going to hit read. I'm going to go to this folder here, to the PNG sequence. You can see that it has a number here, 0 through 139. That means that this sequence has 139 frames. I'll hit open. And boom, there it is. And you want to make sure in Nuke that you hit S and that the frame rate is set to the same as the clip. And of course, that the dimensions are set to the same as the clip. Boom. So that's how you deal with, depending on what camera you use, Nuke just might not like that file type. Now, how do I export this thing from Nuke? So let's say you finished your composite. Let's pretend there's a whole giant composite here, and we're ready to export. What you want to do first is make sure that your composite has an alpha channel, a full alpha channel for the full image. The way to do that is to do shuffle. Whoops, and actually you should note that this is a new shuffle node created in the new version of Nuke. It doesn't look like the one that I taught you. You don't have to use that one. So this, remember that if you go here to Other and you hit All Plugins Update, this gives you access to a whole bunch of other stuff, a whole bunch of other nodes. That's where you can find the old shuffle here, S. And boom, there's the one we learned. Right here, when you click 1, it gives an entire alpha channel to this thing. So you want that first. If you're gonna, obviously once you finish with this shot, you're gonna put it in Premiere into an edit with your full film or whatever. You want it to have an alpha channel, or else sometimes what Premiere does is for things that don't have an alpha channel, it makes it a little bit more dim. So like in Premiere, it'll look like that, and you might not notice at first until you really start working with a lot of files. You'll be like, wait a minute, what's wrong with this shot? And to tell you the truth, I went through hell figuring this out. It needs because it's like not online anywhere or anything like that, but it needs an alpha channel. So once you have the alpha channel there, you will make a write node. So you remember, to bring a file in, it's read. So the opposite, to send a file out, it's write. And you want to make sure that for channels, you choose RGBA so that it includes that alpha channel that we made right here. Okay, so I'm just going to hit 1 here so it's not confusing. Here it says file, so we need to name our file and tell it where to go. Here we have Nuke, and that's what this folder is for, renders. We're rendering out. And I'm going to render out an image sequence. That is the purest form of our video. I'll make a file. I'll make a folder here, but you know what? Let me save this. Give me a sec. Something is lagging or not liking what I'm doing. Ah, that's what's up. Just gonna cancel this. So I need to name this Nuke script. So I'm gonna save it. Our scripts. Give me a sec. Our scripts belong in the scripts folder. Let's say this is called, I don't know, EM export management, and of course version 1, revision 1. Boom. So when I save my export to renders, I want to make a folder because it's going to be a sequence, and I want to name it the same thing that I named the Nuke script itself, so that I know which script applies to which export in case I go back and change something. So this will be the same name. Boom. So this is the folder that the image sequence is going to go into. Now I need to name the actual images, and I want to name it the same thing as well. Just like this is called city, and each file, the folder is called city, each file is called city. I'm going to do the same thing. So each file will say emvo1 ro1 dot. So this is the thing about Nuke. This is how you create these little numbers in Nuke. You need to tell it how many. Typically we use 4. And to do that we use a number sign. 1, 2, 3, 4, dot. And then you need to tell it what type of file. We're going to use PNG. You could use JPEG or whatever. Definitely don't use JPEG when you're dealing with video, but PNG. So this means it's going to render out. It's gonna number it 0001, 0002, 0003, and so on. Hit save. You're also able to change the file type here if you want to. Hopefully you're able to use 16-bit whenever possible. I'm going to keep it at 8 for now. You want to use whatever your original source file is, but keep it at the highest res possible. And now we're ready to hit render, and we need to choose which frames to render. I'm going to do just 0 to 100 for demo purposes, and hit OK. And if I go over here to renders, I can see those popping up. I'm going to let it render several frames. Okay, I'm going to cut it off in a sec. Cool. So now, let's say I rendered out my final shot. Let's say I did some kind of composite or whatever. I rendered it out, and now I need to bring it into Premiere to put it together with the rest of my film. How do I do that? I'm going to make a new sequence really quick. I'm going to want this sequence to be 24 frames a second. You're probably used to importing stuff and then dragging it onto the timeline and having it automatically create settings for you. But you also want to be fluent enough in those settings that you can do them manually. It's only a few versions back that they started having that automatic thing. But you want to be on the same page with everybody and be able to create that yourself. So one way is choose DSLR. I guess if you're just using 1080p, DSLR is fine. 24. Go to the settings and make sure, 48. Make sure that this is also set to 24. and then you would name your sequence appropriately. I'm just going to keep it sequence 1 for now. Then I'll do a file import to bring in the file, the sequence. And the way to bring this in, if you just choose this or whatever and hit import, it's just going to bring in one still image, this exact image. But we want to bring in all of the images, the entire sequence. Let's see if I hit cancel on this already. Yeah, I did. I just want to get rid of this temp file. It might screw things up. There we go. Back to Premiere, the thing I want to do is hit Options and check this box that says Image Sequence. Then it's going to understand that I have a sequence that starts here with this number, and that Premiere needs to look for numbers that count up in order so that it puts those things in the correct order, and it will interpret it as a video clip, as you can see by this icon right here. And here it has a frame rate on it, 24 FPS, and I can drag this to my sequence and look at it. There's one thing to take note of, which is that sometimes Premiere, since this is just a sequence of individual images, it does not necessarily contain frame rate information like as a video file would, like an MP4. It might be doing this because I already set up the sequence for that frame rate. Let's see what happens. Well, no, I'm not going to mess around with that. But what you might need to do, like it might interpret this as like 12 or something, and then play your your sequence really fast or something like that. What you might need to do is right-click on the clip itself and go to Modify, Interpret Footage, and then right here you might need to oh cool, from file, it did inherit that information. You might need to go here and change it yourself. I also went through hell figuring that out, man. Like, this is crazy. Anyway, if Premiere doesn't understand the frame rate properly of the image sequence, that's what you need to do. Boom, boom. Okay, cool. Another thing is I'm going to go to a different composite. I'm just going to close this right here. Don't need it anymore. One thing I need to mention though is you'll notice that I put V01. Here, if you do save comp as, save new version, and hit save, it finds a V and increases the number so that you don't have to go manually type 02, 03, 04. If you make a big change, change the version. If you make a small change, change the revision. Anyways, best practices in VFX. So I'm going to go back to here. I want to open up a real composite. From another situation. I'm going to delete this. So this was for a 2D animation. These sort of weird characters shooting at something. I can show you the layers really quick. These are the background pieces, which are actually made of 3D. Here we have the each character individually. These are the sorts of elements that a compositor, a pro compositor in a studio environment receives, and we have to put them all together. And we aren't always told what we have to work with. We just receive them and have to put them together. So Yeah, that's the comp. As you can see, you know, it has to be, these parts and pieces have to be developed and combined in certain ways. I'll use, let's see, these things as an example. Here we have here a shadow was made, and it was used as a mask to color correct down the floor. Let's see, here we have the guards with all sorts of things sort of done to them. So let's say, like, you know, when you have a situation like this is just too much stuff to be looking at. Like, I wouldn't want a composite to get much bigger than this, because like it's just, you can't even find stuff anymore at a certain point. I mean, you can, but, and that's what these labels are for. But this is a bit much to be looking at, right? So one thing you can do is go to a place like here. I'll just choose one. Let's say the guards, and also it makes everything run slower. That's usually, that's a big part of like why we do what I'm about to do, which is to make a pre-comp. The way to do that, one way to do that, is that you can actually go here, create a write node. Actually, hold on. It doesn't even have to like go anywhere or be connected to anything, so it just has to come from here. Let's say I want to export the guards as a single video clip. That'll make it run a lot easier. So let's see. Let me just look at this. Okay, there's no alpha channel information on this anyway, so I don't need to include that here. But what I can do is, let me find my folders. I can go to Nuke, renders, and I can make something called, and sometimes the file names get long, so like S26 guards precomp VO1 or something, but I'm not going to go through, I'm not going to make this a complicated file naming process. Just want to show you how this works. And then I want to name it the actual file, that .1234.png. Boom. This shot is only 15 seconds, part of like a big sequence of stuff. And then let's say I render this out. Shouldn't take long. Boom, it's done. Now I can hit read. It knows where it is. Bring in the sequence. There it is. So now all this compositing that I did, which is essentially like this stuff to create the guards, now instead of needing all of that, I can just use this one little, it's now just compiled into a single clip. And I don't need that stuff anymore, and I don't need Nuke to process that crap anymore. So that's one way to make things a lot more swift. And you know, it's often the case that you might do that for more than one element, but usually for the heavy ones. Another thing you can do, that's sort of a older way to do it, it's quick. Another way to do it is Precomp. There is an actual Precomp node for that now. Let's see. Where you can sort of keep these nodes live and compile them into a single node and bring them into another Nuke file if you want. You can also like have two nukes open and copy something from one nuke and paste it into another nuke. But yes, Precomp node. You should definitely look this up in the Nuke documentation and get familiar with it. It's quite simple to use. All right. I think that is it. Just triple checking. yeah, that's it. Image sequences, the purest form of your video. Okay, friends, see ya.